Well, welcome to The Breakdown, everybody. We're sitting down once again with Pastor Nick. It's another week. It's another brand new episode. If you're new, welcome. Thanks for listening. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting either in person or digitally, I'm your host, John Humston, the smooth, sultry voice. There you go. That's laughing right now.
There it is.
That's lead pastor
Nice.
Nick Pierce,
Whatever.
Calvary Chapel, Lake of the Ozarks.
Calvary Chapel.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Whatever.
So we're back for another episode. I have lost track of even telling you. I think it's episode 22 is what we're on of season
this
2
season,
of
too.
this
Yeah,
season.
yeah,
Of
yeah.
this season. So a couple things to
Do
read.
people care about that? Why do we? Is it just so like, hey, did you watch episode 2 or 3? Or if they liked it, they can. Like,
I always, for me,
reference
I'm a
it?
sequential person,
Oh,
so it's not
okay.
like we story tell, but because I guess we're kind of going in
with
order.
Revelation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just easier, so they don't have to go back.
You can tell I'm like really new at this whole podcasting thing. Like I have no
He's
idea.
green.
I just stand here and
He just
talk,
comes in and
sit
sits down.
here.
Is like, whatever you need me to do.
They really, honestly, like I have no idea
I'm
where
your
you're
puppet,
going.
just-
Nothing. Yeah, I'm just whatever.
Remember, you're the brains. I'm the tech side. That's the.
And then we should be very concerned if I'm the brains of the operation here.
Trust me, we're not. So, so last week was our first week back.
Yeah.
The people got what they wanted.
Oh my goodness.
So
Wait,
much.
what? Yeah, tell them about the
So-
episode last week.
So we uploaded the episode. We set a record last week.
Record-breaking episode.
The highest downloaded episode since the beginning of the breakdown. And what's crazy is when I checked that, that on Monday.
Yeah.
So it's Tuesday now. We're recording,
So
but
you
I checked that
checked it
yesterday. And that's not all the time that other podcasts have had. I mean,
Yeah.
you go back to episode 1, they've had 22 weeks of going back. And so it was crazy to me. And what's funny is to watch the connection between the YouTube, like the video version of the podcast.
Oh, yeah. I didn't
and
think about that.
Those numbers are even up. Not much. But
Do people like to
more,
watch us do this?
Apparently.
There are a few little nuances that you miss.
I always tell everybody,
Just audio-wise.
I just told somebody today, I was like, hey, you're a faithful podcast listener. Have you ever watched? And she was like, no. I was
ain't
like,
got time for that.
You need to. Like, you know us. It
At
would bring
least
a whole,
once.
yeah.
Just one time watch it.
You got to watch once just to
Yeah.
see what it's, what it's like. But, so yeah, I thought that was interesting.
My wife listens to it when she's walking.
Oh, is that when she listens to it?
Yeah. So many people have put us in their like normal schedules. And I think that's why having our 3-week hiatus like sent people through the roof because it messed up their like my
So
wife
did your
was
wife
like
not walk for 3 weeks?
no, she was like, what am I going to listen to for 3 weeks? Like,
She's like, I'm not walking to you guys.
yeah,
to
it was
podcast.
almost like that. It was like, what? Okay.
We have a board member who listens while he does yard work.
Yeah.
I know every time I call him, he's like, you just interrupted yourself. And I'm like, what?
And then there was one time me and my wife were on a run and we passed somebody from our church. And I waved or whatever. And I was like, hey, good morning. And they said, hey, what's so weird? I'm listening to you right now.
Well,
then
I'm
I look up and then I see you.
It's like
and
a
I was like,
16th dimension.
Yeah, it would be kind of weird, I guess.
So apparently people are relieved that we're back. I didn't realize how much power we had until this
I didn't know
week.
it was power, but all right, real question. Do you ever go back and listen to it?
Uh-huh.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that bad that I have never went back and listened to one?
No, my wife's not listening to any of them, so your wife at least supports you in what you do.
Amen. Your mother-in-law listens to it.
My
though.
mother-in-law listens to it. What's up, Jane? My mother-in-law listens to it, and then I know
thought
that
her name was Mary. Is that the other one?
No, that's
it's not season.
Oh,
That's where the rumors start. Just
man.
a joke. Calm down, people.
goodness gracious.
Easy with the power here.
I know they've been talking because Lennon will be like, so I heard you talk about me on the podcast. I'll be like,
No,
You talk to your mom?
She can't address it unless she hears it firsthand.
or she'll hear it from.
If her mom calls her, that's gossip, Jane. Jane, that's gossip. You can't tell. No, I'm teasing,
Most
I'm
of the time,
teasing.
it'll be the day of. She'll be like, so I heard my name get mentioned while you guys were recording. What'd you talk about? It's like, I need to do that quieter, softer.
Usually my wife has questions. Hey, you said this on the breakdown. Can I ask you a question?
Why does she never text those questions in? We didn't have a single text in this week.
It was a straightforward, easy message.
So easy.
A great prostitute.
Yeah.
What else could be? I mean, I said this in one of our staff meetings. I said the only joke out of all three services that I felt bad about is, and I think it was second
It
service.
was second service, right? At
I
the
was
beginning.
like, I said something about the great prostitute, and I said, and everybody wants to know who she is. And I just saw somebody turn, and I'm sure they weren't doing it because of that, they might have just been turning to like whisper something.
Or
they were. And it's like, don't be looking to your right or your left. Don't be asked who's the great prostitute.
It did get a loud
you look over.
chuckle out of the audience.
And then somebody counted the number of times I said the word prostitute.
Do you remember what it was?
I only remember our worship leader said, hey, last service you said it like 6 or 7 times.
The number that I was told was 37.
Out of all 3 or just in one service?
I think in one service.
Dang.
But I think they're including...
I had to read it.
You had to read it. I mean, from the time you started.
I mean...
Because let's be honest. Though the sermon that is posted on the church website is second service.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask. That's a good question. That's a good thing to know.
The full service that's posted on the online campus is 8 o'clock. And you came out of, like, you came flying in first service with just like not mincing words. Like you came out, I was like, oh, we're talking about the great prostitute this morning. I mean, you were right out of the bat. Just
the Lord gave me a word, and I did. I felt like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Like, this is what it is. You woke up, it's 8 o'clock service, great prostitute, open up your Bible. Here we go. Call it what it is.
It was such a good message. Just personally speaking, take the staff member.
Yeah.
It was such a good message. We have talked privately, and even on the podcast, how, talking about sexual immorality, in general is hard, but when you put that mantle of the church on it and the things that we allow, I think the way you said it Sunday was, how did you say it? The acceptable sins, like the sins, respectable sins that we allow in the church, and just having, the ability to walk into an uncomfortable conversation, and it just be, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're talking about.
Another staff member said it was their favorite sermon of mine. I was like, dang, okay.
It really was good, and I think because
I didn't feel that, and maybe that's good. I didn't feel like I came off of the platform feeling like, all right, good. You know what I mean? Like, solid word for the people, edifying, encouraging, challenging, like. And I think and every time people have told me like, hey, that's one of the tops, I've always felt that way. So I guess when I come off the stage feeling like I hit a home run, they're like, that was horrible.
It was the worst sermon you've ever done.
Did you even sermon prep? What do you do on Thursdays?
And I wonder too if, like, for me, there was a tangibility. I don't, making up words, where you walk away. Some of that has been hard as we walk through Revelation, is like, not that it's not applicable. Yeah. But it's like, how am I going to take this new information? How am I going to walk with this throughout the week, in my job, in my family? Whereas this is something that hit everybody that was watching online, sitting in the room. Like, you didn't walk out of the room going, that wasn't for me. Yeah. If you did, you weren't listening. You need to check your heart.
Yeah. I mean, pastor included. Like, and that's where, like, as we're getting later in the books, chapters of Revelation, I'm thinking through like, okay, yes, we're not going to be there for this specifically.
Sorry, just feel like I have to gasp every time you say that.
We're not?
I need a sound effect.
But if that is what Satan's going to use in his religious, faux, spiritual thing, if that's going to be one of the main indicators, like the thought that I was having is, how's he using it now? And to think the level of that immorality that we have in our own country and our own churches, I would only believe that it's only going to intensify during the tribulation and under his, I don't want to say leadership, but when he's in control. Faux leadership. When he's in control, it's only going to be heightened to greater and greater lengths. And so, like, I think that's another joy of more of my stance of end times that we're not going to be there is I'm just thankful I won't have to experience not the wrath of God. Amen to that for sure. But I won't have to experience the fullness of Satan trying to bring his kingdom and his thing, or like it is already burdensome now, in the church age, let alone what it will be. And it's like, I can't even imagine that, because I see how successful he is using sexual immorality, and not just to kill, steal, and destroy, but I mean, that's one thing if you're outside of the church, but even just the deception that is infecting the church with it is, or if anything, it's not deception, but it's causing at least an apathy or a, what's the big deal? Yeah. You know, the license of grace to sin. And it's just like, and I always like it does it, like you could hear a pin drop, and I know it's always a hard topic. And I hope people see and know, and I guess if they don't know my testimony, they wouldn't understand that. Like, I'm not saying it as a guy that has not lived through any of that.
No experience.
I'm saying it like Paul would say, I'm the chief of sinners. Like, and so a lot of my, and maybe why I can get so passionate about that is because I saw and experienced firsthand the destruction that sexual immorality can bring upon the human heart and mind. And it's still a battle every day.
Yeah.
You know, I remember speaking with my son about pornography and just telling him, like, hey, this is how old I was when I was first exposed to it. And I said, in the best analogy at the time that I gave him was, you know, that awakens a dragon that you'll never put to sleep. You'll only have to fight him.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can subdue him and you feel like you're winning that fight. And other days you feel like you're just getting burnt, and then other days you lose the battles, but you know, you'll always have to fight that dragon. You know, it's because it's one thing if he's sleeping, but the moment he wakens up, you can never put him back to sleep. And it's just like, and for young men and women to try to leave, like, 'cause now I have younger kids as well, and seeing their innocence, it's like, oh yeah, I would so love that.
Yeah.
You know, or just look, and the hard part for me is now looking at their ages, knowing, you know, I was already exposed to pornography younger than my youngest kid.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Super young, dude.
Dang.
Super young.
That's young.
But that's what's hard, having older siblings and older friends.
Yeah.
You know, so we would, you know, I wasn't a normal third grader. I was hanging out with fifth graders. I wasn't a second grader. I was hanging out with, you know, that's who. So I was always exposed to things, I think, prematurely than my age because of an older sibling. Not that it was his fault. It was just, that's just who I hung with. That's who I, you know, but super young in response to it. And it was just, it was super unhealthy. And I didn't know, and that's the thing, like, I didn't even know what it really was. And I think I said Sunday, like, but as a parent, I'm going to lead in those awkward conversations with my kids. Yep. You know, because I don't want them to expose something, feeling a shame and a guilt that they don't even know why they have a shame and a guilt, but and that just kind of proves that there's something inherently in us about that. That's like, hold on, what's going on? Like, I wanted to have those conversations on the front end with my kids, no matter how awkward they are, because why would I let that to somebody else? I mean,
those conversations are being had.
Oh yeah,
you can have them, or the world can have them.
If you are worried it is too early to talk to your kids about it, you're already too late. Like, now again, small question, small answer. So I'm not going to sit down, you know, a 5-year-old man, like, all right, push in the DVD player. Let me show you what. No, like, we're not doing that.
When a man loves a woman.
Yeah, and we saw that even with our own kids. Like, when we were pregnant with Emmy, you know, how does the baby come out? Well, that's why doctors go to medical school. Oh, okay.
Just know your phone is ringing off the hook when mine gets that age. Like,
no.
How'd you do this?
I'd be like, you need to talk to your dad. But, you know, and the line has always haunted me. Somebody will disciple your kids. And even, like, let's take it a step further. So it's not only that I wanted to teach because I'm going to throw my son under the bus right now. Not only did I want to teach my son a biblical understanding of sexuality, I also wanted to be the one to teach him the slang stuff of it. Because I never wanted him in a circle of friends. Somebody says something and he doesn't know what it is.
And they're going to pick up on that immediately.
Ooh,
and they're going to crucify him.
Yep.
Because I remember being in those conversations.
Absolutely.
where your innocence,
Yep.
your lack of understanding.
Because the world will not protect your child's innocence. And no matter how good of friends you think your kids have, they will not protect your kid's innocence. Like, that is our job as parents. But for me, teaching my son those things, I was protecting his innocence because I gave him the proper understanding and the proper teaching and training in it. Doesn't make it immune to him.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it, okay, they're never going to struggle with sexual issues. No. But at least they're walking in with a proper education instead of letting the internet, letting the movies, letting the music, letting the whatever, the world, their friends, disciple them. And, because if they set the bar, how hard is it for us to remove that and show them what a biblical worldview is towards sexuality? But if I set the bar and if I show what a biblical understanding is, then the world has to compete with that. I don't have to compete with the world.
Yeah.
So... And a lot of it is because I know the brokenness that I came from. I know that and I've told my son that before. Like, I can't call somebody and say, hey, when I was a lot of this we're figuring it out on the fly a little bit. We're live action right here. Here we go. So it is a hard conversation, and it is going to be awkward. But who do you want to have that? Who do you want your kid to have that conversation with? Who else other than you? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's what it means to be a mature adult, is to grow up, sit down, and have the honest conversation, and just be upfront, be open, be honest. But if you start it in little ways, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
So it's probably too much, but let's jump into it. So last night we're sitting at dinner, and it's the 4 girls. Well, I mean, all of them now have been educated on the monthly cycles of a woman.
Yeah.
Like, they all know what's going on. They all know there's the cramps and all the things. And we talk openly about that.
Yep.
Because my girls are in gymnastics, and they have to wear, half of a bathing suit type of a thing. And just not the favorite for girls at certain times. But we have open conversations about it. And even the young ones know it and they understand it. But it's even before we're there yet.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because if you lead in that well in little ways, my wife said it last night. I said, here it is. I said, here I am, a dad of daughters. And she goes, and don't you love that your daughters feel so safe?
Yeah.
That we can openly talk about these things. And it's like, yes, I guess.
Yeah.
But it would probably weird other people out. Honestly, it probably would. Now, we're not weird about it, but
you guys are just a very open family.
We really are.
We've talked about that.
And I've heard even grown ladies say, like, I could never have had a conversation like this with my mom. Like, I didn't learn, and it's just like, and that is hard, but it's not like we sat down one day and we gave them the full kit and caboodle.
You got 8 hours of class.
Yeah.
Here we go.
It was something that dripped in at what was age appropriate, and it got dripped in over the years almost, and got us to this point. So it never was like, all right, we're going to do it right now. We're going to give the full. Nope, just small.
You turned 6. Here we go. Let's go.
Exactly. No. Would not.
This is your rite of
recommend
passage.
That. Scare that 6-year-old. Be like, what? But it was small conversations frequently. And so that, and if there was, like, I remember the first time somebody said the F word around my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled him aside. I said, do you know what that word is? Do you know what that means? Do you know how it is used? And it's like, no. Okay, let's talk. So there were things that I wasn't able to. Yeah. And that's one of my big pet peeves. It's like, don't force my kid to know or learn something that I'm not ready for him to know. And so when somebody would, thanks, my kid's never heard that before. Thank you so much for being the first person, shoot somebody.
We had one of those moments. Maybe it was Sunday night. We were sitting outside. Girls were playing outside, and someone who lives on our street, very loudly and obnoxiously, just loves to scream obscenities outside.
It's me, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, we live right across the street from Nick. It's Nick.
No, it's not.
And so there's a point where I could hear it. That the girls were playing, and then they were out playing basketball, but it was like But then it got to the point where it was every word.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, girls, let's go inside. Like, because my 3-year-old is perceptive.
Oh, yeah.
She's innocent. She doesn't know what that is.
Yep.
She can repeat what she hears.
Yep.
And then I have to have a hard conversation with her that she has no understanding of what, I mean, she's still trying to formulate how to say words correctly.
Yeah. And I think one of the greatest ways to try to fix that is I have a crossbow. No.
Nick just walks out, broad daylight.
Yeah. All right, this can go down one of two ways.
You can stop talking, or I'm going to pull the trigger.
I have a crossbow.
And what's crazy, two things that always come to mind is, as I'm maturing now into being a dad with, with littles and hearing stories like that and trying to prepare myself, knowing I'll never be, prepared. And there's always been, I feel like, this trepidation that that as parents specifically, if we're the ones that introduce said things, that we're the ones that introduce the sin in their life. And it's like, that's not true in any degree. Like how much, like you said, how much easier is it that you introduce the awkwardness and you have the conversation to where they feel safe and comfortable, that when those things, that line of communication is already there, rather than them finding out from social media, from their friends, from the internet, from school, from whatever, and then try to come to you. Because
who introduced disobedience to your kid, but they're dang good at it? And not speaking specifically to your kid,
let's
but
name it Leighton. I think Leighton had a meeting with Satan himself one day, and just laid it all out. It was like, here's.
I mean, because if that's true, then say it all the way back. Then everybody would be perfect, because then we just don't need to introduce anything to them and Truman show them, or we put them in a dome and control everything around the world. No, I mean, that's the same reason why the asceticism or the monastic movement was failure, because they're thinking, I need to get out of a world of sin and live up in the mountains by myself. Well, the problem is sin dwells in your heart. You can run like Forrest freaking Gump, and you're not going to run away from it because sin dwells in your heart. So it's not don't introduce your kids to it, because then they'll fall to it. And it's like, I've seen some massively disobedient kids. Did you introduce that to them, or did that inherently come from their sin nature?
So you said something that made me think of something you said on Sunday, which was very jarring for me. I'd never thought about this.
Oh, crap.
And for someone who's grown up in church, who has been told this thing incorrectly, it was one of those, like, maybe my identity
maybe I'm
had
incorrect.
No. Like,
okay.
So you talked about fleeing from sexual immorality. You know where I'm going with this?
Nope.
You don't?
Nope.
You talked about scripture called...
You don't stand and fight it.
You don't stand and fight it. You flee from it.
Yeah.
Because that's not something you're going to win.
Yep.
You run away from it. And I was like, I have always, until if you take Sunday out of the equation, I have always heard you fight sin. You fight sin tooth and nail.
You fight temptation. So one of my professors is Dr. Keith Miller at Calvary University. Is probably one of the most influential people in my life, and he probably doesn't even understand how influential he was, because he was just teaching classes.
Yeah.
Obviously, good connection. We've even had lunch together when I was in town to reconnect, stuff like that. And he's just, and what was so great is as he would be walking through, let's just take Old Testament, New Testament survey classes. He was a pastor for 20 years, and he always wanted to teach for another 20, and he just thought that'd be kind of cool. But every once in a while, he would stop, and he would pause, and he would kind of take the teacher hat off, and he'd give you the pastoral.
A little bit different.
Yep. And he would say a lot of things like, hey, when you're in ministry, this is a good. And one of the things, and so every time he spoke there, a lot of the kids would kind of tune out.
You tuned in.
Dude, I tuned in even more. And so a lot of my notes of ministry are tucked in the middle of
his pastoral moments.
Right? And he said, a great little passage, if you're ever going to speak to some students or whatever, let it be a one night thing, or if you got like a little retreat and you're looking for a 3-parter or something like that, 2 Timothy 2:22. He goes, it's easy to memorize, it's easy to remember, 2 Timothy 2:22, right? So flee youthful passions So there's like step number one. You put a whole sermon around that.
Yep.
Flee sexual immorality. Flee youthful passions. But in fleeing that, what do? Pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace. So you want to flee youthful passions. You want to pursue after righteousness, faith, love, and peace. And then it says, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. So flee youthful passions, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, and then surround yourself with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, what are you running away from? What are you running to? And who are you surrounding yourself with? That will preach any day of the week.
All day long.
Yeah. And it was that mentality. He was at that, when he was given his little quick rundown, that's what he said. He goes, the Bible always says to flee sexual immorality. To the degree that it's almost like we are not strong enough to stand against it. Mm-hmm. We need to flee from it.
Because I would always tell my students, you draw a line in the sand and then you turn around and you run.
Yeah.
Because
always good.
If you draw a line in the sand and then, because in student ministry, words don't always sell, so you have to do the visuals.
Yep.
I would always pull a student up and be like, okay, this tape line is your line. And if this is the line, how close to it can you get without going over? And so they would all,
great analogy,
stand right up to it, lean over, and then I'd just come and barely tap them, and they would go, falling over. And I said, but it's like, but it seems like if you've grown up in church, mm-hmm. it's always been this, the righteous Christian thing to do is to put on the full armor of God, and then go to battle.
Yeah, endurance and perseverance is never used in the context of fighting sexual sin. Now, other things, possibly.
Yeah.
And yes.
But
I would say definitely temptation for any sin. He will, what is it, 1 Corinthians 10:13, that he would provide of a way of escape for you to be able to endure it. Like you can endure that temptation. You don't have to fall to that temptation. But within the sexual sin, which some people are, is all sin equal? I'm one of those that says no, and we could talk about hamartiology another day.
That's season 17 of the breakdown.
There you go. Because, and clearly we can see it in Scripture where Paul says all other sin is outside your body, but the sexual sin is inside you, committing sin against your body. And so to him, there was something different. And that's what some people believe when Paul was talking about the thorn in his flesh, that it was a sexual sin that he struggled with. Because of that, and I could understand that. I mean, Paul's the apostle, but he's not dead. Well, he's not dead now. He's living in Christ. But like, even when he was on earth doing ministry, like, Lydia, who sold purple fabrics, she might have been hot.
Sure.
And Paul probably liked her, or, some people wonder if Paul was married or not. And, it's like there was real temptations there. There was
a whole different context to the Bible.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Right. And think of all the Pharisees that threw the woman caught in the midst of adultery at the foot of Jesus. Mm-hmm. How many of her looked at her, even while they were standing there with a stone in their hand? They caught her, butt naked and threw at the feet of Jesus, and Jesus didn't see her in that. But how many of the other ones were standing around and had even just a small glimpse of lust or pleasure in seeing this degraded naked woman at the feet of Jesus with a stone in their hand to kill her?
Oh, I never thought about that.
I mean, look at our world today. Is that not the same degrading heart that we see in pornography and things like that? Why? I mean, so you have this self-righteous that, that's, yeah. So I just always the encouragement of flee from it. And some people ask, well, what does that practically look like?
Run.
Yeah, literally run.
Get in your car, drive away, run away. I don't care.
And every time you talk about sexual sin, we can talk very practically about when things go down, right? So if it's a guy and a girl, in their car parked, don't be in a parked car together. Don't be home alone together.
Yeah.
If it's
don't set yourself up for failure.
Don't set yourself up for it. If it's an individual with any kind of electronic device, don't be alone with an electronic device. I had so many students I had to struggle with pornography, and I would ask them, the vast majority of the time, when are you looking at porn? And they're
at night in bed.
At night in bed. I said, charge your phone in the living room. Problem solved.
Give your phone to your parents.
It's my alarm clock. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll foot the bill for a $5 alarm clock, you idiot. You're over here talking about your brokenness and how you feel just so shame and guilt, but you can't chuck out $5 on an alarm clock even though you're holding an iPhone 15.
Cost $1,200.
Kick this kid in the shins, man. Oh my goodness. Or like, I don't want to ask you, your parents bought you the phone. You think they wouldn't buy you an alarm clock? But again, that's the deception of shame and guilt, and all of this is to think that there's no practical way of escape.
Yeah.
Or just get rid of your phone altogether. And there has been a little bit of a movement of that, getting away from like smartphones where they just don't have access to that.
Yeah.
Or going back to the parenting thing, like if you give your kids a cell phone with no accountability to it, you just gave your kid a gun. Like, and not that the restrictions, let it be like an accountable to use software, Covenant Eyes, or a Life 360, not that those are foolproof, because you're not going to have it foolproof, but at least there's something there. And so when I handed my son a phone and said, okay, these are the ground rules. Why is that? Because this is an amazing tool that could be used for good and for evil.
Yep.
And it opens the conversation instead of just, oh, here's a phone.
I want to be able to call you or text you so I know where you're at with your friends.
And how many parents we'd go on trips like they need their cell phone in case they need to get a hold of me. Like, you would have died as a parent 20 years ago before we had these. Like, what do you think
I had a parent smuggle.
Oh.
Gave their kid a burner phone even though they signed a covenant.
A burner phone?
It's a little, I'm not kidding you, it was a little like,
oh my goodness,
pay-as-you-go flip phone.
Yeah. They're like, well, what happens if you get in a wreck? I have 11 leaders on this trip with phones. I'm sure the salvation
it's summer camp. This isn't a 90-car pileup in the dead of winter. Like,
and if it does happen, I'm pretty sure that your kid's not going to be the one that's going to save us all because, guys, I got a burner phone. Yeah. Like, shut up. You know what it is. This is just me. So if I'm taking it too far,
let's go. Let's find out.
Let's see.
Too far.
When we would put restrictions on cell phones and parents would push back.
It's the lack of control.
The lack of control, and I think it was a guilt and a shame unto them that they couldn't put good boundaries.
Like, why haven't I done that?
Why haven't I done that? And so there, it's almost like, oh, are you condemning that I don't have? And it's like, I'm not condemning you, but I'm definitely encouraging you. Have some conversations. Yeah. And then, I don't want to invade their privacy.
You're the parent.
You are, yes.
And they don't have privacy.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to they're not in jail where you have to watch them shower. It's not that kind of privacy. Yeah. But yeah, like if you are not engaged in your kid's life, and that parents would be shocked at how much their kids are really dealing with, struggling with, or being enslaved to, if they just took a week and did some investigating. It took
a day. What do you think, a week? So prevalent.
Well, they would need 6 days just to process.
And, yeah, absolutely.
And every kid they would open up, my top 3 questions, one of them would be, do your parents know? No, we can't tell them. It's like, you can tell them, I can tell them, or we can tell them. Which one would you like to do?
They're going to know.
They're going to know. I'm not going to hold this, And it's just hard. Now, let's same topic.
Yeah.
Now, instead of parents to child
to parent.
Spouse to spouse.
Ooh.
Because every time we talk about it,
yeah,
there's just sometimes you just have the feeling of like for me, every time I talk about sexual immorality, what's hard is I always have to define it. Sex outside of the context of marriage between a man and a woman. Okay, anything outside of that, sexual immorality, right? So everybody's like, oh, is this a sin?
If you have to ask, it probably is. Yeah. Let's just go with that.
Yeah.
If you have
Instead of asking, is it a sin? How about we just uphold what biblical sexuality is and know that well? Because then all the counterfeits, it's a counterfeit.
Could you imagine just being like, oh, I thought that was sin. It's not. Oh.
Every camp that I've ever done as a student pastor, we would always do a Q&R time. Love a good Q&R time.
Question, response, not question and answer.
Yeah, there it is. Because I can respond to everything. Doesn't mean I have all the answers. Every time this card would come in.
I bet you already know where this is going.
Is masturbation a sin?
Yep.
That would always be one. Is this a sin? Is that a sin? And it's just like, that's like trying to just figure out all the counterfeits of money, but you never want to understand what has true value.
You only study the counterfeits.
Yes, you're only studying counterfeits. And you don't know it's a counterfeit unless somebody else tells you it's a counterfeit. Yep. But if you know the real thing, then you know what is a counterfeit. And so, but then when you switch it now, because when I talk about it, I think one of two things happen. The feeling that I get is one, oh, he's not talking to me. I don't struggle. It's like, okay. Lust has been ridden from your heart. Yeah. If that is true, you could be making millions on talking about how to help people to get out of lust of, come on, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, boastful pride of life. Everybody falls to that. And so, oh, he's not talking about me, or, oh, he's just talking about teenagers. Mm-hmm. But you know how many spouses live in fear that I can't let my spouse know what I have done, am doing. Like there's just not the openness where, like, when I do premarital, like, number one, like, if you're keeping things from each other, like, we're already on a path to doom. Just give it time. Like, my wife can walk in, grab my computer, my laptop, same thing. My iPad is what I meant to say.
You have a computer and a laptop?
I have a computer and a laptop.
Dang.
That's how good ministry is. No, she can grab my laptop, my iPad, my phone, everything, and search the snot out of it. She has my passcode for everything. Be like, well, I don't know his passcode. And then your marriage will fail.
That's a problem.
That's the first thing I'll say. And I've said it that harsh. Well, we don't do, your marriage will fail. Just give it time. And it works every time. Yeah. And all the social media stuff, everything. And for me, struggling as a young man with pornography, I remember very young in our marriage, the first time I had to kind of just come clean and confess to Ashley, like, that was super humbling. Yeah. But again, we're both young in our faith, immature on both sides of it, because she'll even say, like, at that time, I'm not shocked by that. I thought every guy did that. Like, we almost didn't see an issue with it for a little bit.
It was the acceptable sin.
It was the acceptable sin. Yeah. Like, how could you, and there's people in this world, for me to teach purity and abstinence to teenagers, or even purity to us as men, it's like, that is neglect. Mm-hmm. That is abuse that, and it's like, no, it is anything outside of the bounds of marriage. That is sin. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to get that specific about it. We don't want to get, and so when we do talk about it, we want to keep it vague so that I could lawyer my way out of this. Yeah. I could talk out, I could make a case. I could justify my behavior instead of just saying, is this bringing about a kingdom impact in my life? Mm-hmm. Is this drawing me closer to the Lord? Like, this isn't even, is it lawful? Is it profitable? No, like, we're trying to justify sin here. And I think that's one of the places that Satan is winning, is within marriages. That if you even feel scared to ask your spouse, you've already lost the battle. Yeah. And my wife still asks me to this day, do you still struggle with the temptation of pornography? Every day. Every day. She's like, really? And I'm like, well, it's not like I'm like cold sweats and like my head in the corner. Yeah, I'm like, it's not like I'm addicted to crack. Yeah, that's what she's expecting. Like, what's wrong with Nick over there?
Up in the morning, she walks out like, just woke up, and you're over there like, I'm dry, I can't.
Over here, like, man, are you on crack? What is going on? But like, how many times does Satan try to remind me of my past? And she was like, what do you do to combat that? And it's like, well, obviously, accountability software, accountability with people, accountability with her. And I said, the other things I just think about, is it worth it? Let's just have the conversation. Do I really want to sit down across from the table from you and say, John, as your lead pastor, I torpedoed my life? Yeah. Now
because it started with this, but it ended.
Yeah, exactly.
Much worse than.
I don't want to have that conversation with you. I don't want to look at the board. I don't want to look at those guys and say, hey, I got to be honest right now, and I am not walking how I should be, and not because of I'm a pastor. Now that definitely does have a higher degree to it, but even just in my walk as a Christian, like and then do I really want to look at my wife and have that conversation?
That's where I always go to.
Do I want to, now that my kids are older, like, I have an almost 16-year-old daughter who is absolutely beautiful.
You need
do I want to have that
power?
Absolutely. And every guy is mop water. And that's my quote.
Quote unquote.
Do I really want to have that conversation? Do I want that burden on my child? Any of them? Do I want to stand up in front of the church and have to have that conversation. When you stack it like that, and it's not that I have that conversation every little time that a thought of temptation hits me, but I need to have it regularly. So that, is it really worth it? When you stack it like that, it's not worth it at all. They're not even close. And I haven't even got to the point of my relationship with the Lord. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which is the greatest of all of them, you know? And so, yeah, like temptation, lust, those darts still get thrown at me. And I've talked about it openly before where, on a Sunday where you're walking through high V, and especially down here at the lake, you cannot control what other people wear. You know,
walking to Walmart and they just came off the boat with minimal clothing on.
Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to, you know, get rice and beans for dinner tonight. You turn the corner and it's like, good night of living. Like, it's like, I'm not going to the produce section. You know, it's like you can't help the first glance. And there was a time in my life that the first glance wasn't enough, and I needed 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it would ignite something in that. And now you can't help the first glance, but I immediately, you know, and not this big, massive, long, I hit my knees right there in high V prayer. Just, Lord, discard me. And I try to pray for that person. Mm-hmm. And not that they're like trying to flaunt it, you know, but, you know, even just it just shows the level of society where, yeah, it's acceptable and it's okay. And I've heard people say, oh, it's just the lake. Oh, is it? It's just the lake. Okay. So that's okay with you. That's fine. So let me show up to your house in a bikini. Be like, what?
So that's how you combat it.
That's how I'm going to do it. Well, it's just the lake. That's what you said. If you're okay with it at high V, why can't I be okay with it? Yeah, I'll wear that Sunday then.
I was going to say, we should do that. Let's experiment with that.
It's just the lake, guys, you know, and I hear that and it's just like, no, and then you get in the topic, well, is it degrading to females because they can't wear whatever, and males should learn how to control themselves? Biblically, go back to the freaking garden and understand. When Adam looked at Eve, when she was naked, you know, we see the passage, people have preached on it. He says, whoa, man, you know, like, because he calls her woman. And there's the joke on it. We are visual beings. God created us that way. And that is a truth. And I believe Satan absolutely takes that and manipulates it with lust and desires like that. Did Eve hide herself? Was Eve ashamed to be naked in front of Adam? No, she appreciated his response to her. And that is also in a woman. You know, and again, Satan takes that and mars it, smears it, manipulates it, because think, how many times do women feel ashamed even to be naked in front of their husbands? You know what I mean? Like, and there's issues in marriage, but it's like, and so Satan, the greatest counterfeiter, is taking those two things that God created good. We see it good in the garden. Adam loved looking at Eve. Eve loved being looked at. But then Satan manipulates it both ways, both spectrums or whatever, you know. So take for the woman, like those that want to flaunt it and make guys stumble and trip and break their necks and they think it's a game. That's one side of the spectrum that's a counterfeit. And the other side of the spectrum is a counterfeit is the immense guilt and shame for some ladies, even within the context of marriage. Nope, still want to throw guilt and shame because, you know, and it's like that's where the church has done a horrible job of teaching on the biblical worldview or biblical understanding of what sex and marriage and stuff like that is, you know, where we've talked about this even just privately, the whole purity culture of the 80s and 90s, where how many people that did it God's way, pun intended. Sorry.
I was trying not to. I was like, don't laugh.
Don't laugh.
It's a serious moment.
You know, they dated, they courted, whatever you want to call it. They waited until marriage, but then their marriage night, which was supposed to be a glorious, amazing thing because that's God's gift to marriage, actually was, they wake up the next day or even they don't even make it, but that night it's just guilt and shame because they've been taught and just drilled into their heads virginity, not purity. The Bible does not teach virginity. The Bible teaches purity. Because if you only teach virginity, you just narrowed And again, that's going back to what you were talking about with youth ministry with the line. Okay, if you say, oh, the line is virginity, what's the first thing that humans do? Figure a way around it.
Yep.
Oh, I'm still technically a virgin. And it's like, okay.
How far is too far?
Yeah, and all that. And other forms of sex. Because, it's not, getting real graphic here, penile, vaginal, intercourse.
Yep.
So, I'm still a virgin then. And it's like,
you don't get to define that.
Yeah, teach purity, because then everything's on the table. It's not just long as I avoid that, which, can we get real? How real can we get? Is this too real?
No. Listen, they can turn it off.
Yeah, that's true. If it's too much.
I would rather get real than not.
So let's just talk about how we try to skirt the laws of this. Like if we only teach virginity, there's a real popular movement within the Mormon faith. Young people that are Mormons that are trying to skirt the law of the sexual boundaries that are placed upon them, and it's called soaking.
I've heard
soaking and shaking the bed. So it would be wrong in the Mormon faith to have sex before marriage, right? And yes, it is in ours. We can talk about that, but I'm talking about the Mormon faith right now because this is where I'm hearing this come out of. And so there's soaking where there would be a penile vaginal insertion, but then they don't move. They just stay there.
Yep.
There's no movement.
Yep.
But then, thank goodness, they have a good friend that'll come and shake the bed for them. Now, you just took an intimate moment that was supposed to be within the context of a husband and a wife. Now you got your friend in here shaking the bed?
Just got real weird.
That got super weird. But that just shows, in a negative context, how creative we and our broken human hearts are to skirt the rules and be like, well, that's the Mormon faith. Yeah. And it's no difference in any other faith, because again, the desires of our heart naturally are not to do the things of the Lord and not to walk in faith, trust, and obedience. It's lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the boastful pride of life. And I was talking with somebody even Sunday, like, we talk about walking in freedom, but sometimes we what does that really mean? And I think the first line of that is when we're trying to skirt the laws per se, or the boundaries that God gives us to sex, and we do not want to hold a reverence to the confines of marriage and the marriage bed. Whatever else that's your God. That's why idolatry and that sexual immorality are so tied, because now that has become your God. That is what you're going after more than trying to honor and walk in obedience to Christ. And so it's a heart issue, but it's an idolatry issue. Yeah. But you say it like that, again, say it in some of the worst ways you can, really show the significance of it, where it's not I just kind of struggle with this lust or that lust. It's like, no, you struggle with idolatry, because that's your God. Your ability to express yourself sexually is your God. So you take that concept and you apply it to anything. Apply it to the transgender movement, apply it to the homosexuality in our world. It's like, that is their God. And so it is a religious movement, because to them that is the greatest thing on the earth, and to which they operate and evaluate the world around them is that. So
sorry, I'm looking up a Bible verse to see.
He's fact checking me. He's looking up Bible verses. Where you at? Where you going?
Hebrews 12:2, 1 through 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So that's ESV.
Amen.
I've also heard it, fix our eyes.
Yeah.
Fix our eyes.
Fix our eyes on it. Yep.
Because one of the things, I don't remember where I heard this, when going off of what you said, whatever our eyes are fixed on, that's the thing we're worshiping.
Yep.
And so when you take that and you really think through that, how many times a day? So that, like, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier, and it's like you'll hear people say like, "Oh man, I sinned so much this week," and I found myself guilty. Like, I don't feel like I sinned much this week. Like, I'm not saying I didn't.
Dang, I was walking on water.
I just was like,
I kept trying to drink water, and it turned into wine.
You know, like, but you go to the big sins.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't look at porn this week. I didn't like, but it's like, for me, what have I been fixated on this week? I've been fixated on paying the bills. I've been fixated on making sure my family's taken care of. I've been fixated on making sure whatever our next step in life is. And so I've taken the Lord off the throne, which this is Geron's theme in life. And I've placed either myself or that thing on it, to where instead of focusing on the Lord and walking out in faith and trusting him that, like, I have desires and laying those things before him, like, we'd really like to sell our house. We'd really like to do X. We, Lord, if it's your will, if it's your design, if it's your desire. So like, even just getting, I was like, oh crud. Like, how many times do we find ourselves fixated on the thing that we're trying to circumvent?
Yeah. Because if our Christian faith, like you were saying, is so good, if our Christian faith is just trying to avoid sin, that is not the abundant life that Jesus came to give us.
That's not freedom in any way.
Not in any way. And where in the topic, it might be sexual immorality.
Yeah.
But we all have, like what you're saying, that idolatry that we're replacing Christ. In the old hymn, turn your eyes upon Jesus.
Yep.
Look full into his wonderful face.
Not partially.
Yeah.
Not three-quarterly.
And what's so great about it is that the things of this world will grow strangely dim. It'll be weird to you. And so the things that I used to love about life, the people that I thought I was so close to and I could never do life without, strangely, those things grew dim. Why? Because the light of the world. We walk in that marvelous light. We're looking and fixing our eyes upon Jesus. That's good. It's a good word you got there. Now, okay, so funny story.
Let's go.
Every time I hear Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, I think of Ken Maxey.
Okay. Love Ken Maxey.
Oh, Ken's great. So Ken is one of the pastors up at Grace Calvary Chapel.
Your old church?
My old church, right? He was kind of over all of student ministries. He's kind of like the head honcho of student ministry. The guy, yeah.
So what did that make you? Just guy?
Just guy. Yeah. Like little guy. Like so like it was just a good team of student ministry. So children's pastor, me, college ministry, and then him, and it was just a good team. And he preached for me one time. We were doing we called it Beyond Sunday.
Okay.
It was a student ministry conference that we put on.
Let me guess, this was outside of Sunday.
Boom. Because the connotation was, we want you to take your faith beyond Sunday. You know, there it is. Ha 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 ha.
We don't hire idiots here at Calvary.
There it is, right? And so he preached this text, and he was talking about, let us also lay aside every weight. Okay. Right? The best analogy. So every time I hear that, I chuckle because of Ken's story. So Ken Maxey, if you're listening to this, thank you. Thank you so much for this. He was talking about one time in school, he was running track. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he was doing like the 400 or the 800, something like that, but he's running. And whenever you're running every once in a while, you'll knock a little phlegm loose. Mm-hmm. You know, like it just kind of happens. I'm a runner. Like I've hawked a few loogies in my day. You know, and if you're in like a really crowded group in a cross country meet,
you just spit on them.
You're aiming for the calf of the guy in front of you. Like, let's just call it what it is, you know. And he goes, I'm running. I get on the backside of the track. I feel it. I hawk it up, and it like whoop, like it's a doozy. And instead of just like letting it fly,
no,
he grabs it. He spits it out in his hand. And he runs the rest of the race.
Stop it.
Holding this massive loogie in his hand. And all the kids are like, ew, gross. And he got so descriptive about it. But then the real thought is that why do we hold our sin the same way? Why are we holding the thing this great way? Why don't we just lay it aside? Why don't we just throw it away? Because the sin, which clings so closely, run with endurance. And he's like, throw that away and run with endurance. And so,
never gonna read that.
Oh man, it's so good. And I love to
call him and be like, you have ruined Hebrews for me.
Oh, it's so good. So when you said Hebrews 12, I was like, oh, Ken Maxey.
Please go 12. He said 12. I bet you.
Yes, here we go. He said 1 and 2. We're totally talking about the loogie. But but when you think about it, when we get gross because we talk about a dude running, around a track with a loogie in his hand, but like, how gross is it for us? It's one thing for the world to walk in ignorance of their sin because they've never been made aware of it. But how gross, using that term, is it for us who have been redeemed and restored by the blood of Jesus, who is in the middle of our own sanctifying process? Do we keep holding on to the very things that Jesus died for and told us to let go of?
Yeah.
Like, that's where the new, what does it mean to walk in freedom? Let go of the old life. BC Nick is dead and gone. And so, like, put it in a funeral analogy, like, and I'm a morbid person, so I'm probably the last person to talk about stuff like this, because when I go to funerals, and I take my grandparents, died separately, and so it was grandpa, then like 8 years later it was grandma, and I'm not going to hold over the coffin. I'm not going to hold their bodies. It's like, I just have to let go. They are dead and gone. They are with the Lord. I have to let go of that.
Yeah.
That relationship, that was it. There we go. That is it. And me and my son Dayton were even talking about this, like the reality of just life and death. He goes, we were talking about me and his mom, me and Ashley, and he said, one of you were going to lose the other one. One of you was going to do that. Like, one of you were going to have to lose the other one. He goes, you should beat her to it. I was like, did you just ask for me to die first? Is that what you said? Or do you want your mom killed off first? What do you want?
Either way,
it's not looking good for you here, bud. But the dead things of our life, like, that's a part where we need to be self-reflective, look at our own lives and say, what are the dead parts of my life now that I'm alive in Christ? What are those dead parts that I need to let go of? So it's one thing, God's going to chisel us and knock those things off, right? He's going to shape us. But what are those things that we keep picking back up that Jesus threw down? And it's like, I have something better. Let go of that.
Greatest video of all time.
Oh yeah, God's chisel.
God's chisel.
Oh yeah, grab that and a cup of coffee. You'll cry your eyes out.
And a box of tissues.
So my professor that I was talking about, Dr. Miller, he was talking about that same kind of concept. And he said one of his daughters would, when she was real little, she always wanted mini pennies. She was real little. She'd just walk around with a handful of pennies. Oh, my mini pennies. And she just loved it. Never put them in her mouth, nothing like that. Just always had her little treasure of mini pennies, maybe 10 cents worth of pennies. And he said, you know what? I'll see what she'll do. He goes, he grabs like this big old dollar coin. He says, I'll give you this dollar coin for your mini pennies. She wouldn't do it. Even though bigger, more valuable, but it was mini pennies. That's what she wanted. And how many times are we rolling around holding on to our mini pennies of the dead life, and God has something so much more valuable? And it is hard because we're so used to what we know, that what could God possibly bring to make my life better? That is a great question to ask him. But will you live not just a committed life, but will you live a surrendered life to allow him to answer that question? Because if your hands are full of your mini pennies, then you'll never have room in your life for the great things that God wants to bring to you.
That's good. That's a good place to stop.
And just let
I got more things rolling around my head, but that's a really good place to just go, you know what? Sometimes less is more. That's good.
Well, I don't know if it's good or not.
No,
but it's where the Lord's hitting me. And so, like, yeah, I don't walk in the old fights of sexual immorality anymore. Obviously it's still on guard against the temptations and not naive to the flaming darts of the enemy to try to bring me down. But I just have to keep looking and saying, all right, what are the other pennies in my life that I'm holding on to? And you recognize one of those, you lay it down at the foot of the cross, and you hold your hands empty out to the Lord and say, I believe that you have better for me. That's faith. Looking at Jesus saying, I believe that you have better for me. And whatever the guardrails and the pathways that he has for us and what it means to live for Jesus, I believe that he has better for me than what this world has to offer. And so as I say a lot on Sundays, maybe you can get sermon bingo. I'm going with the guy that walks out of the grave on this one. So
I got bingo.
You got bingo?
I win.
There's a bingo game.
I know. I've seen it.
Okay,
I've put my eyes on it.
Yeah,
it works.
Heathens. So
it happens. Well, we're gonna hang up our hats here. We're gonna turn the mics off. We're gonna call that quits for today's episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube or listening wherever you consume podcasts, don't forget each and every week we have the text line. If you ever have a question, I'm gonna maybe give permission where I have no authority to give. But if you're sitting in church on Sunday or you're re-listening to the message and you're like, man, what did Nick mean when he said that? Or I just need some clarification. Our text line, you can text The Breakdown, all one word, to 573-679-3760. We'll put that in the show notes. We'll put this week's sermon in the show notes as well, so you can go back if you want to rewatch or re-listen. That's what you're talking about. But we'll be back next week with Revelation 18.
Ooh.
We'll dive into Revelation 18, and we got some things to talk about next week. So we'll do that next week. But have a great week, everybody. We'll see you guys later.